Okay, so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is this idea of student choice and what does that mean? What does it look like? First thing we want to do is kind of come up with a definition. What does student choice mean?
What does that mean to y'all, student choice in the classroom?
So I think one of the things as we kind of start looking at some examples of maybe what choices look like in our rooms is to kind of first take a little pressure off ourselves. Remember that choices does not mean that you've given up control, but that you are in charge of the choices. So I've joked about my 4-year-old little girl who loves all things glittery. Getting her dressed in the morning can be a battle because we want to wear what we want to wear and I want her to wear what I want her to wear. And so how do I balance those choices? Well, then I give her the options and she makes a choice from that. So you're not relinquishing your control or authority as the teacher in the classroom. You're just providing the choices that you will accept. And I think it's also important to think too that student choice is not all day, every day. There are times when choices are available and there are times when choices are not available. And realizing that it's something that, ebbs and flows within your classroom is important. So here are a couple things quickly that I do. One thing, we do a lot of cooperative learning in our classroom. And so my groupings, you always have the choice of groups of 1, 2, or 3. It's just my rule. So students who prefer to have their music in their ears and kind of do all the work by themselves, you're welcome to work by yourself. If you're more social and you want to work in a group, I've realized that 4 people is 2 people working and 2 people playing. So groups of 4 are not allowed. So groups of 1, 2, or 3, you pick how it works. And that allows them to have some choices about how they want to get certain assignments accomplished. Note-taking to me is critical because if my students are going to study their notes, I need them to understand the notes that they've written down. And so giving them some freedom in how they want to take those notes, I think is important. So a couple of ways that I do that. One, luckily for me, I'm in a computer lab. So some of my students do type their notes, and they love it. Some of them print it, some of them upload it to different note-taking websites. Some of my students borrow my highlighter for blue pencils, and they do it that way. Another thing that I will do on occasion, and this is not every presentation that I give, but some presentations are easily read. And I was a learner who learns through reading. I need to write the notes, then go back and read the notes. I don't necessarily comprehend when I hear it. And so what I've started allowing students to do is I will give the presentation, and simultaneously, if you don't want to listen and you just want to read, then sometimes they'll have their music in their ears and you will see them reading the PowerPoint and they're not listening to me at all. But they're learning. And I will stop them. I'll say, hey guys, I'm on PowerPoint slide 7. Those of you who are not listening, tune in. You'll see the earbud drop. And I will go over the slide that I feel that needs some further explanation, some clarification. I don't know if you can understand this slide just reading it on your own. Then I'm done, the earbud goes back in, and we're all clicking. And then I'll have some kids, they've gone ahead, and then they get to a slide they don't understand, and they will stop on their own and wait for me to get there. And so that's giving kids a lot of freedom. And like I said, that's not every time, that's not a guarantee. But on some of the presentations, that has helped.
A couple of things that I like to do. I'm a real fan of the Cornell note-taking method. Has anyone ever heard of this? The Cornell note-taking, one of Marzano's strategies. The concept is you take a piece of paper and you fold it in such a way that it creates a space for students to actually take notes about what you're teaching in a given lecture, but also to come up with their own essential questions. And the idea was, it came about by a guy named Walter Pauk in the 50s who worked at Cornell. He was teaching history and he was frustrated at a high failure rate, low pass rate. So he created it in such a way, whatever is being delivered in your class, your content, whether it's math, whether it's science, whether it's history, the student is going to have the opportunity to write down whatever they think is important here in this area. They can doodle in that free space, but they have to get the salient points, the things that they think are important. And they're going to write down here an essential question that is drawn from this line of text here. So if there's a lecture given over the 5 points of nutrition, then somewhere here that you should see as you're going back to reflect after that they have written down 5 essential questions, or at least essential questions that lead back to those 5 points. Then they can take that home, they can study this as a homework thing or have this as a review, and then they have the material here. I can look at that paper and I can say, okay, look, the student did get it. Your note-taking needs to be adjusted a little bit, needs to be heightened so that you're hitting it right on target. You're maybe not fine-tuning it as much, but as a teacher, you're able to use this in a way that it allows for the student to make their own choice of content they think is important. However, you're the one that has those ultimate end on, what they actually get, and you can sort of have a little bit bigger tabs for it. Another thing, when I was thinking about student generated or not so much student choice in the classroom, I began to think about, how students would have a little bit more of an aspect or a play in the assessment, or if they would have the effect and the criteria of how something is graded or scored.
All right, guys, so take a break from student choice. How do you think student leadership is different? Well, let's talk a little bit about some examples from our classrooms. One of the things that I implement, Chef Everson and I both in the kitchen, is this idea of a chain of command. So in the kitchen, I'm the head chef. I will assign a person to be the sous chef. And then in each kitchen, you have a lead line cook. And the example that I've used throughout the day is I had one student last semester. Precious little girl came to me and said, I'm nervous about being lead line cook. I don't know how to be a leader without just fussing and being bossy, and I don't want people to not like me. That's a brilliant question. I said, well, being a leader doesn't mean being bossy. Being a leader means you're helping others. And talking through how she would lead others was a great learning experience for her. And I'm sure in a lot of the projects and assignments that you give, it's possible to assign roles. So if you are working on a group project, this person can be the facilitator, this person can be the organizer, and assigning roles to students. So sometimes leadership is given, and another way leadership can be given is through studying in stations or peer tutoring. So one of the things that I found is when we get to the math lessons in culinary, kids really don't want to do math when they'd rather be cooking. But as a chef, you have to understand math. You have to understand the math and measurement. And you have to understand the math of purchasing if you were going to make a profit in a restaurant. There is a lot of math for chefs. And so that unit, I have my students who are in advanced math, and this is very easy for them. I have students that are struggling in math, and so this is not easy for them. So one of the things that I will do is we will go into the kitchen. I'll put 1 or 2 students in each group that really understand the material, and other students in the group. And I've broken down all of the different topics, and the pair of students will then teach or tutor or kind of be a safe place for other students to ask questions. I have found a lot of students don't want to ask the question in front of the whole group, but they'll ask it with those 3 or 4 students. Switching back to career prep, one of the things that we do research are different colleges, and instead of making kids research, 30 colleges, you research one, and then the rest of us will present the college. And it's really a fun project because we pretend that we're college recruiters. They got to dress like they're from the college, and it's a competition to see who can recruit the most students to their college. And it's a really interesting project. This is one of the times in the semester where students actually get in front of the other students, and they have to give a presentation. And if you'll notice, this is an eMaze, and this is one of the websites I suggest that they use. A lot of people have heard of Prezi.com. To me, eMaze is much better. Kids like it better. It's easier to use. And since it's on a website, you can collaborate outside of school. It's not on your P drive here at the school, and kids really enjoy it. But before they get up and present, they have to meet with a partner and review each other's. Now, they are not grading the other person's work. That's not their job. But their job is to help the other person see an example. How many of you have kids when you give a project, what does it look like? They want to see. And so allowing them to see somebody else's, and then somebody else seeing their project, allows them to talk through and to kind of have something to compare theirs to. And so I just go through and they have different questions, they comment. And so everybody gets to be a leader at a different time. So sometimes leadership just happens naturally in my classroom, and then sometimes leadership is assigned.
I like what Matt said a minute ago about differentiating the instruction and knowing how to differentiate the instruction. And one of the things that I do for students in my German class who are of varying proficiency levels, some basic and then some a little bit more, we do what we just call it a newspaper office, and we have different roles. So people who are going to print something, or if something's about to go to print, we're coming to a project at an end. We have an editor who has a little bit more editing skill than maybe a copywriter. But we have different roles that we give out, and these can rotate later on. But then the editor gets the chance to say, okay, I'm the one who makes sure that the work that's been submitted under me is actually going to be ready and proofed for publication, and then they get to tag their name with it as an editor. As far as building relationships, anything that I've ever learned or used well from education was something I probably stole from another professional, and this comes from our friend Max Jones. He actually introduced the Marcel Proust questionnaire. We use it every year. It's the first day of class, and you're getting to get to know the student better asking a little bit more off-the-wall types of questions. But they're the kind of questions that really sort of open up who they are, and it's just a really good. It's more than just how old are you, where were you born. It's questions like, what's your favorite treasure? Do you have among other things, I think one of them that shocked somebody earlier was like, how would you like to die? That comes later on in the questionnaire, but it's questions that are supposed to take them into explore their psyche just a little bit and their personality. And then what happens is you find as they answer, sometimes students, as you know, they'll get very deep very quick, and they'll actually get into some poignant responses. And sometimes those things stick to help build a relationship later down the road.
And I think one of the things that's been important for me is to figure out what is your role in your relationships. And so we had a great discussion first walk with a teacher who made the great point that she is not as comfortable in learning the more personal side of her students, but her relationships are more built on the fact that she is that teacher who is always available before and after school to really help them with the content. She's that teacher that you can trust to help you with your schoolwork. And that is a beautiful example of how that teacher builds relationships with her students. And there may be other teachers who know a little bit more of the personal side, but I think the more we've talked about this today, the more that I've learned that everybody's role in the relationships with their children or their students is different. The relationship that you have with your students should be unique to who you are. And so one of the things that I've done this year for the first time that I've loved is bell ringers. Does anybody ever do just random bell ringers for just random questions? What was your favorite toy when you were a kid? What was your favorite TV show as a child? And that's how bell ringers sometimes. And it is amazing how much I've connected with my kids, or how they have spoken to somebody that they've never spoken to before because they found out they both loved, Dragon Tales when they were a kid. So that's just a suggestion to kind of help to get to know the personality of your students. Because I noticed there are certain types of children that I tend to connect well with, and there's certain types of children that get on my nerves. They just do. And there's certain things that kids do. Tapping is like, if you start tapping around a ring, the head's going to pop off and spin around the ring. And realizing that child did not sin against God because he tapped his fingers, but my reaction sometimes is like that. And so I think it might be important for all of us to kind of reflect back, what are the things that we need to be aware of ourselves, because I can't change that some kids are tappers. They've got to move. And realize maybe I need to be aware of that more so than the student does. And for me, not kind of pushing that under the rug, but addressing the reality of pet peeves has been important for me this year.
Well, thank you.
Have a happy day.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. You're welcome.